the Village of Campton Hills meeting to order. It's March 19th, 2024 at 7:22 PM. Roll call, please.
Trustee Boatner? Here. Trustee Burson?
Here.
Trustee McElvey?
Present.
Trustee Millette? Trustee Morgan is absent. Trustee Muncy?
Here.
President Wonicky?
Present. Please rise for the pledge, and Chief Levand, would you lead us, please? All right. We'll move on to public comments.
Thomas Bayoun? Microphone.
Oh, okay. Who is responsible? Is the city responsible? Township responsible? Is the homeowners responsible? I find these on my driveway.
What are they? We can't see them.
They're bags.
Landscaping.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, gee, thanks.
I just don't know
You should call the center.
who's responsible for that. Is the village responsible for those people? They're not solicitors. They're not on the soliciting group. And if they are they?
You would call that, that is soliciting.
Yeah. Are they registered with the village? No. So why doesn't the village get a hold of somebody and say, hey, don't do this again? We need a reputation that says the village is tough on people like these people that drop things on their driveways. And you drop things on our driveways, I got to go pick it up. And I pick up 3 or 4 a year. I don't like it. And it's not nice for the neighborhood because some people don't pick it up and it goes every place. So that's
Okay,
all
I
I have
think
to say.
Chief Levand has something to say regarding this.
Yeah, thank you. So we do, those are solicitors. It doesn't matter where they place it. The reason they do it that way, they know that Campton Hills is strict on soliciting. So the reason you see the rocks in them like that is many of these people, what they'll do is they'll drive down the streets and toss those out as they go. We're super strict on it. You can even go online. We have a list there of people that have applied, got the background checks, have valid soliciting
Right.
permits, which is usually only maybe 1 or 2 at a time. But anytime, like, if you would see that happen, if you call us, we write ordinance citations for that every single time that we deal with a solicitor that does not have a permit.
Chief, I know you can't, be every place, everyone.
I
because
try.
You only have, you only have 2 people, on parole, and it's tough. It's a tough job. Just catch them in the act.
But
It's
what
tough.
you did is actually a good thing. So here, I'll tell you what else we do as a police department. So if you also notice, if you ever see people take their signs, power washing, seal coating, and put it in the right of way.
Right.
We go pull it out and we write the company a ticket. So if they've left their company information in there,
Yeah, they did.
we will write them a ticket and we will either send it to them or drop it off and they can pay their citation and they will stop putting rocks in your driveway.
Great. The neighborhood, I'm worried about
I
the
got you,
neighborhood.
the whole neighborhood.
Because I am part of the neighborhood and part
Absolutely.
of the association. Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you, Tom. Okay. No other public comments?
No other.
Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda, I'll take a motion to move the consent agenda.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Burson. Second, do I have a second to move the consent agenda? Second by trustee Boatner. Any discussion? Okay, roll call.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner? Aye. Trustee McElvey? Aye. Trustee Millette?
Aye.
Trustee Muncy?
Abstain.
Okay. Motion passes. We're moving on to staff reports, and we have one, and that'll be Chief Levand.
Thank you. So the police department report for February, you guys haven't gotten your hard copies yet, but I'll get that sent to you here shortly, so I'll just give you the overview of it. 110 calls for service, 46 citations, 4 accidents, including one that was a personal injury. The Beast Evidence System has been installed and training has been done with department personnel. Remember, completely independent evidence system that now barcodes and tracks every piece of evidence that the department brings in. One of these upcoming village board meetings, we will show you guys how the system works and why it was such a good investment prior to a board meeting, so you would be able to see it. But it was an excellent, excellent investment into the Beast system. Flock camera was approved by IDOT. That should be installed within 30 days. Officer Coda and myself took part this week and still have a couple more days of the graduations for Too Good for Drugs at Belgraham and Wasco schools. It was 16 weeks this year. Myself, Officer Hatt, and Officer Harvey assisted teaching the kids throughout the school year. Have been working with the Fire and Police Commission to fill upcoming openings in the department. We had the entry-level testing process about a week ago, and we are currently starting interviews this week. That includes the entry and lateral, so I expect that will take a little bit between interviews, backgrounds, et cetera, but the process has started. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Chief Levand or comments? Okay, thank you. Moving on to 7 action items, motion to approve the fiscal year 2024-2025 meeting calendar.
So moved, Muncy.
Moved by Muncy, second by McKelvey. Roll call, please.
Trustee Muncy,
Aye.
Trustee McKelvey,
Aye.
Trustee Boatner, Trustee Burson,
Aye.
Trustee Millet.
Aye.
Trustee Morgan is absent. Okay.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to 8, discussion items, MFT bid award for street resurfacing project update. So Scott, it's yours.
Update on that, projects planned for this year, what are shown as groups 4 and 5. Earlier this week, received final comments from IDOT. As of a few minutes ago, I received Administrator Rooney autographs on the bid document. So these are now ready to be advertised. I will just talk with you, Mark, in the next, looking at a bid opening in early April. Would like to be able to at least bring a preliminary report to the April 16th board meeting. We may not be able to finish every background check type of stuff, full recommendation, but at least get the information to you for hopefully award at the May 7th village board meeting.
And we'll try to get it for April 16th, even if I have to ask for a special meeting a week later, because we want to accept bids in April to meet the construction timeline.
Okay, yep, moving on. Fiscal year 2025 budget review, the 2025 road capital plan. You kind of covered a lot of that, right?
We did cover a bit of it. I'd be happy to answer. One thing I do want to clarify is you've seen 2 different of these exhibits. This was the 2019 robotics. This was the 2024 that we just received earlier today. You notice a lot of
The other one was
darker.
by length, though.
Pardon?
The other one was by length, not by
Doesn't matter.
elevation.
Right. This came in literally hours ago. I did not have a chance to change the pie chart to the bar chart. But it's still showing the percentages of roadways in the different conditions.
Okay,
So, the numbers do remain the same as far as needs. We did have, discussion about some, additional potential grant funding that,
you mentioned that,
that
yes.
we do want to continue to have discussion on if that's something that the village can find a way of pursuing. Could be a pretty quick return on your investment on roadways for next year.
Okay,
And the second one, go to the second one, Scott, because this is what I've traditionally done, because miles is easier to understand, because we talk about a mile of roadway, what it costs to do. So this is the change. I kind of drove Scott and the robotics to get it to this format. Slightly different, but what it shows is still consistent in that we've lost ground that he spoke of at the budget meeting.
Okay, moving on.
A question, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, trustee Muncy?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering, are we going to see a new report similar to the 2021 report for the 2019 data? Will we see a new report for the 2023 tested data? Because if so, there's some things that I would ask to please just clarify. In the 2021 report, maybe it was accurate in 2021, saying that we spend about $400,000 per year. You know, we're looking at budgeting almost $550,000, just MFT, let alone what we're actually going to spend. So it's considerably more than that. I'm not saying it's going to make up the complete difference, but we're spending more than that. Also, there is an estimate in here that one of the options is saying to keep our roads in their current condition, we would need to do 3 miles of road per year at $500,000 per mile. I think that maybe that was an estimate in 2021 we need to look at again. We've done full depth for less than 400. We're doing about 200 plus or minus now for the mill and overlay. So, you know, the 500,000 is way off even with engineering. So just if we're going to look at this, I'd like to just have the numbers corrected for current estimates. And then also, again, I still realize that we're, you know, $1 million short of what we really want to do. But, you know, having accurate numbers just always helps.
Okay,
Certainly, I will do that, and we will update the, I'm going to flip to the last sheets in here, update the cost for the roadway improvements. You know, on the left side of the table are different costs depending on how they're improved. They're calculated based on square yards converted to mile. The further down, the more intensive improvement down to FDR at the bottom. And then since these started in 2019, we'll adjust costs increases to current to moving forward.
Great, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
The good news is, second meeting in April, we'll have a actual per mile cost, because you're gonna be approving this summer's road program, which, could you speak to that a little bit, just to where we're at?
Yeah, it's currently estimated a little bit over 800 for the roadway improvements. 800,000 in cost. Then that is at the yellow level of improvement. That is the minimal mill, patch, and overlay level of improvement. One of the things that you'll notice if you look at the 2019 5-year plan is we actually do not recommend that level of improvement on any of the roadways because of their deteriorated condition. We were recommending at the greater levels of improvement. That contributes to the difference between what you have for funding and the long-term need.
trustee Burson, go ahead.
I want to clarify the numbers of the miles of road per year that we're talking about, because I've heard 3, I have heard 5, I've heard that we've, 3 is the maximum that we've ever been able to achieve, right? On average, our Public Works chairman explained to us earlier. So with about 100 miles of road in the village, and you're going to divide that by what reasonable life? 20 years on the outside, you're at 5 years, or excuse me, 5 miles of road,
That's correct.
right? So you can't do less than 5 miles of road per year and not fall behind, sounds to me like.
Correct. If you,
And so when we've talked about this in years past, it seems like this was aspirational, and it was a little bit confusing that there were 6 miles done in 1 year, as if that was a pace that we would be able to continue, but that was actually 2 years that were combined together. So we're back to the 3 miles per year. So we've never really come close to this 5 miles, let alone, or 3 miles, right? So the point being, this is not a new hole. This is a hole that has been there for several years.
correct.
So we're not just trying to figure out how can we pave X number of miles per road going forward, but we have a significant amount of backfill to do, as I read it, looking at all of the orange and red on the charts you gave us.
Yeah, so you basically, I think you're drawing the right conclusion, trustee Burson, is that you've existed for 17 years, so the deficit of failed roads or failing roads has been building for 17 years. That's why I spoke to, you have $1 million on a good year of funded capital, but you're $1.5 million to $2 million unfunded to stay current every year. And that is a good way to show it. If you spend $750 and you should be spending closer to $3 million, you know each year your deficit of problem is growing. I think that's why I wanted in this budget to be very clear to not blame anyone, past or current administrations, for this problem, because you were saddled with MFT dollars, being a very limited fashion, and other revenue sources have never been actually adopted. So, of course, you're gonna fall behind. It's a simple math problem. It does matter what style of road improvement you do each year for those miles, and that's where Scott's other chart of the, 200,000 a mile up to the 400-some thousand dollars per mile gets you a different, you get less miles done, but then it lasts 20 to 25 years. So the right answer is, it's a combination of what the best engineering solution, but it's also, as someone has said 2 or 3 times tonight, money that you actually have available to address the problem. The problem and the scope of that problem just needs to be clear. It is growing, and it will continue to grow at the funding level that you're able to pull together.
May I respond briefly to that?
With trustee, yep, go ahead.
So, in the finance committee meeting earlier, the question was asked, and I think anyone could be forgiven for being a little confused about this. If you thought a couple of years ago that this situation was getting better, right, you could be forgiven for thinking that, because it appeared briefly that we were doing, rather more, road work than we're able to sustain over time. So it was a bit of an artifact of pricing one year and perhaps some other things that we did multiple years in one, but the average rate has never really improved, over the last several years, correct?
Correct. Mike could answer that.
Yeah, trustee Millet, he's been waiting.
Thank you. A couple of things I think would help all of us. One, and Scott and I talked sidebar quickly, is the 2019 graph, the colors are weird, because red is shown as 5, which is fine, because that's what we're looking at now. But the bar chart's all orange, and would you go back there real quick, Scott? And it's length, but I think it's in feet or something on the x-axis there. Yeah, keep going. So, if for one thing, to make sure we can tell the story to not just ourselves, and I say, there it is. I say a million times, I apologize if I'm too much inside baseball here. So the orange bar on that one, not the one that's colored orange, but the one that's named orange, and colored orange, I'm sorry, they're both, is the largest bar, which is still true. So right now, that's, call it 40 miles right now on the current robotics, and I can't tell you in that one, because again, it looks like 1,000 feet on the bottom, and so if you can have someone make that exactly look like this one, that would be super helpful, even if you have to, fudge it in Excel or something. But looking at it, that bar is still the biggest bar, and then the yellow bar was the second biggest bar. It still is, but not by as much. And the one that says light green was the third biggest bar. It's not anymore. Yellow is our third biggest bar, which is fair, which I think was light green was fair back then. Yeah, okay, so that's our third biggest bar. The green
which is good, is the fourth tallest bar on that one. And then red, which is good, or bad, is the smallest bar. So the red bar got bigger to this one, right? So the red bar is now as tall as the green bar. So the yellow bar has shrunk in relation to the others. And then the light green is now shorter than the green. So what this all tells me is, I haven't confused too many people, we are the good has gone up. So that is a good story. The good has gone up, right? The rate of the good going up is not outpacing the rate of the red and orange going bad. So that's what we need to, yeah, that's what we need to keep communicating with our residents, so they can understand that part of it. The challenge, as the sidebar we had with Finance Committee, is we try to simplize, or we try to be as concise as possible, say we want to do X miles of roads per street. And again, you could do that mathematically, as I indicated, 100 divided by 20 is 5. That's one option. What we haven't done, and we talked about it in the Public Works Committee a couple of times, is, you know, strategically going after the right ones at the right time. So it may be one year that is only 3, but if it's the right 3 roads, and if you take 3 that are red and move them into green, that's going to give you as much of a bang for your buck as it is to just keep something that was a yellow in there. So if we are successful in the grants for Campton Hills, no, that's on the list, for Town Hall North, Danker, and Brown La Fox, which are all orange, red, and there's a little tiny bit of yellow on Town Hall, which I'm not familiar with, even though I drive that every day. I think that's by Hortons, maybe. Yeah, it's by Hortons. So yeah, so by leveraging the federal money for that, as indicated before, it's probably dollars out of our pocket would be the same as if we waited and did them as our type of overlay. But we would move them into a green, and that green would deteriorate less quickly than our others. So that's a consideration where we could have, and that's about 3 miles-ish, those 3?
Approximately.
Maybe
I think
tad
a
more,
little bit
3.25? So then you can look at as you know, a big shift from, you know, full red on over, in addition to still going at the oranges that we can get at with the resurfacing that we're able to do right now, which are what I'll call more than, you know, the neighborhood, the lower volume, lower traffic streets, so we can look at those thinner overlays and working on those, because those will last longer, again, with the exception of garbage trucks and delivery trucks, which are heavy. But, you know, these arterials or collectors, that is the reason that they're eligible for the federal matching share, because they're on the list that makes them eligible, is something we might want to look at, getting ahead, getting in the hopper, so when the need comes, or when the call comes out from KCOM that, you know, we still need some projects to fill out this year's funding table, you know, we would be able to be considered in that list. No guarantees, but at least we'd be ready to go.
And if there is a motion there, my trustee Millette, I could prepare that with the clerk, that we put that on an action item for next meeting, that we prepay the engineering cost to get eligibility for those 3.2 miles of road of Danker and, say it again? Brown? So-
Town Hall. I
Town
think.
Hall, yeah.
Town
Yep.
Hall, yeah.
So we'd put that possibly, if there's a consensus, I'd put that on for the next meeting to pay the engineering, so we could get in that Kane, Kendall County mayors. I hate to use the shovel-ready term that was popular 8 years ago, but that's essentially what it would be. It'd be easier for the Kane, Kendall Council to shift those roads into the priority payment next year, which would happen this late summer, could even be done this fall, but we'd have to do the engineering of those roads to get that 75%, 25 share. So if there's.
Yeah, you don't need a consensus, we'll just put it on the agenda and,
Well, I hate to
And-
presume that you vote for that.
well,
How much dollars we're talking?
For those three roadways is approximately 200,000. And you're talking a little bit
yeah,
over
that sounds right.
$2+ million worth of roadway improvements combined for those three roads. So,
What did you say, Matt?
maybe 180.
You just took 20 out of engineers.
Oh,
Inside
I'm-
baseball.
okay.
I'm going off memory of the size of those three projects, but those are the order of magnitude numbers combined of those three projects. And as Trustee Millet had suggested, advancing those three which are on contingency and not actually advancing the other one of Campton Hills, because it's already in the program. This would be the best opportunity to jump those forward.
Okay, any more discussion? Trustee McKelvey, no?
Well, I think the question on the table is there a general consensus that we want to make it an action item at the next meeting? I don't have an issue with that.
Okay.
So I don't know what everybody else is.
Good.
Seeing no-
Second,
seeing
okay.
no objection?
Well, the second,
You did second. Oh, you want a second comment?
yeah, it's a second comment.
Okay.
Secondary comment then would be, we talked about again, at the joint meeting, what our fund balance policy is, and I'm recalling it was 50% of expenses for the previous year. If that's the case, then we have 4 million high on that.
Available.
I don't think I would say let's spend I would say let's spend all 4 million on roads, but I don't think I would get a lot of support for that. However, we should have a discussion on what we're doing with that, because we had it in there for build out on this, depending on what we did, and we did great on the budget on this. We got a generator that's coming up that we're talking about, that's a capital expense. We may have a couple of cost share, quote-unquote, cost share type drainage things we've been talking about. So we might want to look at what do we really want as our contingency balance? Instead of just saying GFOA says, excuse me, it says 6 months or 8 months or whatever, what are we comfortable with? Are we comfortable with $3 million or whatever? If we say that's the case and we come up with that number, then except for losing interest on the investment part of it, but we're telling you the roads are deteriorating rapidly, so having the extra interest in the bank is only looking good on one side of the ledger. Then we decide, okay, if that's the number we're comfortable with, and we say now there's $1.5 million that is unallocated, and we say, okay, we're gonna boost next year's road program for $1.5 million, then we could possibly do a little bit more than, we can get into those 4-inch overlays on some of these where we're gonna get some structural on a couple that we're leery about, and then over the course of the next 2 years, you can see a reasonable jump in this number instead of it going down. And then the other thing I wanted to say too, it's gone down, but statistically speaking, it's a less than, it's a percent on the overall number. So let's say we're holding, or we're losing, or we're gaining, we don't know, but we're definitely not going forward, and we may be backsliding, or we may be just treading water at this point. But if we get to a comfort level on that, what we want to say, then we can talk about transferring that. And I don't know, we can even look at possibly doing a second program for this year, just to seeing what the bid prices are.
Seth is a great engineer.
So what he's saying, what I would say is you can afford the 180 to 200,000 advancement out of that fund to pay for that engineer to get 75%. So we'll list it next meeting.
Okay. Trustee Burson, last word on this.
I just wanted to reiterate something that Engineer Marquardt has said multiple times, particularly in the earlier Finance Committee meeting. The village roads are our largest asset. And so it's incumbent upon us to take care of that asset. And if we choose not to spend $1 million here or there to take care of that asset, we don't really save $1 million because the asset continues to depreciate. So when you look at it when you take the balance sheet versus your profit and loss statement, the profit and loss statement being reflective of what we spent or taken in this period, but the balance sheet is where we are capital-wise over time, we're not saving anything by not spending the money. It seems like we are, but we're not, because every year that we don't spend enough money, we accrue a new liability against those roads. And so our actual financial situation doesn't improve. If anything, it degrades by not spending the money to take care of the road. So it's a false economy to imagine that we're saving something or improving our position by not doing the work now that we know ultimately is going to need to be done and has to be booked as a liability one way or the other anyway.
Go ahead, Scott. Last comment.
Last comment. I just want to acknowledge, all of this gets put together, a combination of Public Works Committee, John Mulberry leads, Ray Weber, the Campton Township Highway District. They came here in support of this. I just really, I want to make sure I acknowledge their,
That's good.
their
Yeah.
input and guidance as we put all this together.
Did you say Kim's name too?
Yes, Kim too, for sure. Yeah.
My apologies, Kim.
I will say that your comment about the engineering, if you recall, when 6 months ago, when we reclassified those roads to make them eligible.
John, could you go to the mic so we capture that at home?
I just wanted to point out that when you mentioned about the roads, you came to us about 6 months ago, maybe a year ago?
3 years.
It's 3 years, but we started, but you did put in to get those roads reclassified, and you came back to our committee, said they were reclassified so we could get the funds. And at that time, I believe the committee, we voted in favor of going ahead to do the engineering and for you to come before the village to get this engineering started. That was the discussion we had. So that was 6 months ago, so time is precious. It's of the,
Well, I appreciate that, John. So now the board has, from one of your chief committees, the Public Works Committee, given the endorsement of what Mike and Scott and I
oh,
are
we
saying
have,
to
and I
advance the
think that
engineering.
it was very beneficial. I think that with the Finance Committee, we've only met in the 17, 19 years of the village twice. Last time I was there at the last two finance meetings, and I think that it was very helpful because finance can crunch numbers all day long, and they're good at it. It shows that they have a balance here and a budget surplus, but to get them to understand exactly what we are spending money on and get some clarity, it makes it easier for them to allocate those funds. I think that's a consensus that I got after the last meeting.
Yes, I think it was helpful to have John and Kim there at the last one. I think Jim witnessed that. They needed to know what the need was.
Exactly.
Other than just a dollar amount. This kind of granular discussion of where we're at and what you get for 200,000 of the overlay versus the 400 kind of rough number in to use federal money, you have to go that full depth reclamation project, which gives you a 20 to 23-year road life versus the other version is 10 years plus or minus.
So I guess the point I'm just making is that more communication with the committees is very helpful
It
for
is.
everybody. And we can address a lot of these issues before they get out of hand, which this one's kind of out of hand
Yeah.
already. but-
Thank you, John. All right. We're going to move on.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right. Going to 8C, I'm going to remove that from the agenda. We will bring that back at a later meeting date.
And the reason for that, I talked to the president and having gotten some feedback from some of the trustees, we can look at trying to change the specifications to drop
Reduce
that
costs.
$100,000 cost to a more reasonable number. Even though it's American Rescue dollars, I want to just get the communications and the bare necessities of powering the generator and hopefully getting a better quote.
Thank you. Moving on to 8D, amendment to village code regarding building permits, and that's Nick, you've got the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So I put this together just to have a discussion and see what everybody else's thoughts were on this. As we just saw in the budget, the building department, it's about 60% what it actually brings in versus what it costs the village to exist. And just recognizing that and going through making a few simple adjustments that I think are really advantageous for the village. One, just in the fact that we do not charge any property taxes. We don't levy a property tax. There are going to be some fees. There are going to be some services in the village that are going to cost more than they would somewhere else. You know, the first recommendation or change that I made was collecting our permit fees in advance with an application. When someone comes in and applies for a building permit, to collect the minimum fees at that time, just to avoid any circumstances where someone would not come back to get that permit after we've already invested in processing the permit. The second change that I made was adding an additional 40% to this base cost to cover the village's in-house administrative costs and expenses. And really what that's an example of is we have BNF or fire safety, we send it out for plan review. At no point do we have any calculation that covers all of the time and expense that we put into the permits here. We have someone at the front desk, we have Alex, we have Jim pitching in, we have Mark pitching in, Barb, everybody's kind of around and involved in different permit phone calls, lots of expenses there. And I think this 40% addition above and beyond our actual expenses, I think that this is something that should and probably will go up in the future, but I think it's a good place to start. Example of this would be, you know, $500 fee from our plan review, times that by 1.4, that's the cost of your permit. Second, eliminating a lot of the building permits that are required for replacement items and maintenance items in your home. Replacing a front door, replacing a window, replacing, you know, an asphalt driveway with an asphalt driveway, replacing a water heater with a water heater, changing out your kitchen cabinets. I added language in here which would eliminate kind of these nuisance permits that really, you know, there is no level of protecting the public safety, you know, really what permits are all about. Just eliminating a lot of that paper shuffling that happens in the building department. Again, creating some more efficiencies, making sure we cover all of our costs. And really in making these, you know, the goal is to be more efficient, transparent, a fair process that supports our residents. And I think it would benefit the village a ton. Any questions, suggestions?
Any questions for Nick? Or any comments? Mike, no? No? Janet, are you?
I think I was third in that lineup.
Oh, I'm
so.
sorry. Trustee Muncy, you guys fight it out. Go ahead.
I'll start then, thank you. The collecting permit fees in advance, I think that's a good idea. I don't see how, though, the 140% is in the text. I like that, and that makes sense, because you're still probably, like you said, not gonna cover all the village costs, but we're trying to recoup our costs. And the 100%, obviously, that's for what we actually pay, plus 40% for what our costs are. But that's not in the table, so I guess I don't understand how you collect it up front. If I have a a fence or whatever, and let's say the fence is, I forget where fences are in this, is it $100? Let's just say it's 100, I might be wrong. I'll give you the $100 check now, but I don't know how much the 140% is, so I assume there would be a secondary fee if it went over $100. But the overall, the replacements, or what you call the nuisance permit, I still have a little bit of an issue with, because when we talk about replacing, in here, there is electrical service, gas lines, swimming pools, whether it's a driveway or, a number of things that may have been put in before the village existed, may have or have not met code at that point in time, or at this point in time, or zoning at that point in time, or this point in time. And then if someone is replacing it, let's say it's a swimming pool, for example, and they replace their old swimming pool, spend tens of thousands or more, a lot of money on an in-ground swimming pool, and all of a sudden their neighbor says, well, that thing's way too close to my property. I've known that for years. It shouldn't be there. Well, now there was no oversight in the middle to say, you need to move that 10 feet or whatever it is. If, the electrical system was not installed correctly, if you had a water heater that was installed, with flexible lines, and the person just goes to Menards and says, well, it's like for like, I'll just, plug in the flexible lines off of that. And that's not up to code, that's not safe. And I'm not saying we're here to babysit, every single installation, but if something wasn't correct in the past, and we just allow people to redo those things without any inspection for these nominal fees, I'm just afraid that, I don't know if it opens up liabilities, but it definitely opens up issues for our residents and their neighbors to say, that shouldn't have been replaced, that wasn't legal to begin with. And now the person has to rip it out or incur all kinds of extra cost because they went ahead and did that with nobody helping them to say, yeah, you can't put it there, you need to move that, or you need to comply with the current zoning. So that's my only concern, is that we're not providing that public safety and guidance that I think would be helpful here. And again, for a lot of these, the fees are pretty nominal. And I like the addition of the 40% to try to recoup our fees so that, we get a little closer to our cost.
Okay, Trustee Burson?
I think that there should be a general understanding that regardless of whether it's replacement work, new work, any kind of work, the work that you do should be done to code. I don't think anyone is suggesting that your work shouldn't be done to code to the extent that you know what that is and can do it. And in talking with Trustee Bodner about this issue over time, as the proposal has evolved over time, one of the things that came up was who's really taking responsibility for your relationship with your contractor, right? So if you hire a contractor to replace your water heater, and you have, as Trustee Muncy mentioned, flexible hoses that are not correct and to code for that purpose, then my understanding is that we would expect that your contractor would inform you of that, and as part of that water heater replacement would replace those. And whether the contractor does or doesn't might matter, it might be material, but it's a matter between you and your contractor and not between you and the village or between the contractor and the village when it comes for these more or less like for like replacements. So I can appreciate that there have been changes in code and perhaps zoning and things like that that might impact it, but I suspect that, let's say I wanted to replace my driveway. I happen to need a driveway replacement. So let's say I wanted to replace my driveway, and maybe the way that it was done in 1988 is not the way that we're doing it today. And so the contractor might say, if it wasn't adequate, I hope the contractor would say, you need to do a little extra work, and we would suck it up and we would do that extra work. But whether we do or whether we don't, that I think is, it's our decision to be in compliance with the code or not. And if the contractor tells us, this is the code, and what you had before wasn't in compliance, and we're advising you of that, then you both have a decision to make, right? As a homeowner, you can say, well, I'm willing to go forward and just do a replacement that isn't compliant. Your contractor can agree to do that, or either one of you can say, I'm not doing that. contractor can say, I'm not gonna do that, I don't feel that's responsible to do something that isn't compliant with today's standards and today's code. So I understood that we were generally, depending on our relationships, us as citizens, we're depending on our relationships with our contractors, and we were not, in this proposal, we were asking the village relatively less. We were not asking the village to take responsibility for managing those those relationships with our contractors. And the other thing that I would observe is that the items that you refer to as nuisance permits, and I think it's an apt term, these are typically small dollar items. So when we talk again about the number of transactions that we have to do as a village, I feel better about doing transactions for additions and roofs and new houses and things like that, where we're talking about thousands of dollars at a throw for all of the different interactions that are involved. I feel a lot better about that than I do about hundreds of transactions a year for $100 or $200 a piece. So I applaud the general effort to try and reduce the overhead to the village of these permits that generally I don't think require village involvement. And then the last thing I want to say about the quote nuisance permits is that to the resident or the contractor, it appears to me the cost is not so much the cost of the contract, it's the cost of the inspection, right? Because if I have to get a permit that requires an inspection, then I have to wait for that inspection to continue, or my contractor has to wait for that inspection to continue. And so it may have a meaningful impact on how my project progresses. It may have a financial impact on how my project progresses. So I feel like this is on target, pretty well across the board, and hits those points from where I sit. Thank you.
Okay, sure, Trustee Millet.
Thank you. A couple things along the lines that we've been talking. One of the reasons a building, community development, zoning department function of a municipality is a loss is all the stuff that's done that's no way recompensed. So, and that's a lot of zoning things, that's nuisance follow-ups, et cetera. The permit part of it, the pure permit part of it, generally, yes, should break even, because you should be able to calculate what you're spending on your internal staff time. You should be able to calculate, what you're spending on external staff. And I think 140%, my gut tells me that's a good number. What we could maybe do when we look at what we are considering continuing to permit and not permit, the way we have it phrased now, for example, decks, concrete, asphalt, pavers, drivers, blah, 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 installation of new, non-replacement, or change in size, location, materials, which gets to the points raised by Trustee Muncy, Trustee Burson. If the driveway was put in 1988, 1960, whatever, on the lot line, for example, that's not where it's supposed to be, you can't replace it in kind. So that's a zoning function, in my mind. We're less going to say it has to be asphalt, concrete, or gravel, because we still have gravel driveways. I do. And more about, okay, there was an error, now to correct the error, based on what we just said, this is a change in location. So yes, that would still require a permit. If you are, say, in one of the newer subdivisions, let's use Fox Mill as a good example, where it's very clear that the driveway was put in with, within the setbacks and all that stuff when it was put in, and you're replacing it tearing out and putting it in the same place, yeah, maybe that really doesn't need a permit. I mean, I could see that being, what's the interest in us to have eyes on that when it's going back in kind, which I think is kind of what we're trying to say here. Water heaters is where, I always, that's a weird one, because, yeah, is it up to current code? Sure, or not, but, you're a grown adult, it's your house. Are we your contractor's babysitter? No. So I don't know if I have a clearer feel on whether that's something that we have a interest as the protector of the public writ large, or advisor to the public writ large. The other thing that I think we should consider when we look through this list, I want to keep, what not to keep. Things like, you know, siding tear-offs, again, I don't think that's something we necessarily care about. There's still a thing about roofing. I think just, everybody I talk to still thinks roofs should be inspected. It just, so maybe, but like a window replacement, I mean, we don't necessarily enforce a energy efficiency code, which is where, you know, some of those would come into. You know, if the fire district wanted us to do that on their behalf or something like that, you know, that maybe is a different discussion that you would have, but we're not looking to be a LEED certified community, so I don't know that we necessarily care if you get Marvin's or Anderson's or something like that, because whatever the light and vent was for your house when it was built, you're living in it, you're happy with it. So again, I think that's something I'm not as concerned about giving up. Have we, and this is a question, have we found something where we don't want to do the contractor registration like we were originally talking? Because that was going to cover part of this. If you were doing a contractor registered, some of this would be, some of these nuisance things or replacement things. If you want, you know, if you're doing one of these contractors on the list, okay, fine, you don't need it, you're fine. But if it's somebody that wasn't, then we would still enforce it. Did we go away from that for some reason?
I think Nick dropped that part from his proposal now, right?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
complementary. I think the two work together really well. And I have a feeling that there will be a time when the village recognizes that potentially that revenue for the building department would be a smart thing. But at the last discussion, I did not get the impression that that was well accepted by the board at that time. So I'm just kind of waiting for the right opportunity when that would be, have some value for the village.
Trustee Muncy, go ahead.
Just
Are
to
you-
add one more clarification about, trustee Burson talked about relationship to contractors. The homeowner is still responsible for what happens. They may hire somebody to do that work, but the homeowner is still responsible. The relationship they have to their contractor may include an expectation that the contractor will comply with building code, but it's not gonna include that they review all of the zoning and determine where this pool can be or whatever. That's still on the homeowner. And the homeowner may do a lot of work, especially when we talk about fences, you know, hot water heaters, even a driveway, private walks, gas lines, those sorts of things. And with no guidance at all, the homeowner's just gonna do exactly what was there before, unless they somehow are semi-professional or know what change to make. I guess my only remaining question, though, would be, what other municipalities that we know of do this? Are we modeling this off anybody else that says you don't need a permit or inspection for certain replacement projects?
So it's definitely a mix, where we require a permit for everything. Any work that you're doing requires a permit in Campton Hills. There's definitely a mix. Take South Elgin, for example. Fixtures in your home, if you're replacing like for like, do not require building permits. You know, the city of Chicago has code for, you know, if you're doing renovations under a certain amount of square feet, doesn't require permitting. Every village really has its own take on it, but there's not many villages either that don't levy any taxes. So a big part of this is really simplifying and eliminating some of these nuisance permits. And I call them nuisance because, one, the homeowners don't acquire these permits to begin with. And I had that data in the first draft, just showing, you know, based on a 20-year lifespan of all of these different things, windows, driveways, water heaters being generous at 20 years, you would expect 5% of those every year. And then looking at how many homes were in Campton Hills, came up with some, you know, hypothesis on what that number should be. And it was outside, if you took roofs out of it, it was under 10%. And that's a mix of all of these different things. So I really think this also just says to Campton Hills, yes, you're adults, be adults, go out, hire a contractor. We don't need to come in. Your contractor's not gonna charge you to meet inspectors. Talk to your neighbors, get on the Better Business Bureau, find a good contractor, go take care of your home. You know, the question of, you know, if someone replaces their driveway and, you know, it encroaches on a setback or an easement, the same thing would happen that happens now. I mean, if it comes up where it's an issue and the work was done where they enlarged their driveway, or they enlarged their pool, well, that goes against the code. You were supposed to have a permit for that. So the same thing that we do now, we would do then. You need to remove that, you need to pull a permit, go to adjudication, go through the exact same process we go through now. So nothing would really change as far as that goes. Hope that helps.
Anything else? No?
Just to
Trustee
clarify the
Muncy?
last
Yeah.
statement, I apologize.
Sure.
In your last example, it was an expansion of a pool or whatever, but if the pool was already illegal and you put the exact same pool in, that would still, that's the problem I was talking about. If the water heater were, whatever was already non-conforming and they replaced it exactly the way it was, we wouldn't require a permit, but it would continue to be non-conforming and it would be new and it would be illegal and it would have to be ripped out. So that, I could see where a resident would be upset with that.
Trustee McKelvey, go ahead.
I guess I'd like to get a better understanding of, maybe from our folks in our zoning department, is what we're doing now an issue? Yeah. Is the phone ringing off the hook for complaints because we have nuisance permits? Are we, are the people marching down the street saying, change this? I don't think they are. And so, that's the only thing I struggle with, Nick, is trying to figure out what's the cause and the effect. I don't know. I know today when we heard the numbers from the zoning and the budget, I got questions around that, and I don't know why. They weren't here to explain it, so maybe I'd like to get a little better explanation around that, because I think we're owed that as a board here, to get our arms around what's coming in, what's going out. I just had two sons each bought a new home. Why they decided to buy at the worst time in the economy, I don't know, but they did, and they got home inspections, right? One house, electrical was not good, need all kinds of stuff in the electrical panel. Another one had different issues with the gas line. And I just get real nervous because, if you just don't have a permit, I feel more comfortable having someone pull a permit, figure out what the code is, because these homes were older, so obviously they got to bring it up to code, because back when they built at least one of these homes, they're not at code now. They got to bring it up to code. So, yeah, maybe the contractor would do it, maybe he'll try to get a better price and not do it. I just feel, from a safety perspective, I just think it makes more sense. So, I don't know. Those are the concerns that I have.
Trustee Millette, go ahead.
Just had another thought too. As we go on this discussion, everything we've done through the formation of the village, let's start with what the county is. Okay, step one, let's start with what the county is. We go no less than what the county does. So as we look through this, and some of these, the county would exactly do zoning things on fences and that kind of thing. So if it's something that the county would do where we're not a village, that should still remain. And then we could see it at the ones we're doing that reach to the level of nuisance. Maybe we can get a list of how many window replacements, water heater swap outs that we've had over the past couple of years, and then we would get that number that was talking about, and we can see if, because there would be some time savings, I think, Trustee McKelvey. That would maybe be the counter to that, is if we're getting 100 of these and they don't show up, then that's 2 hours of permit, 200 hours of more productive time, maybe, that we can get back. So that's something we could put on the scales.
Trustee Burson?
So, as Trustee Boatner had explained in one of the early versions of all of this, and touched on briefly, and then I think Trustee Millette touched on it. One of the issues is the number of people who are actually not doing this anyway, and so some pretty quick arithmetic that Trustee Boatner did, based on the number of households in the village and the number of permits issued in different categories and sort of reasonable lifespans for water heaters and furnaces and things like that, made it clear that over 90% of village residents are probably not getting permits for most of these things most of the time. And so part of this all started from the notion of, are these nuisance permits? Yes, maybe, but also, are we, are we in a way criminalizing someone in their own home for doing something that their neighbor on one side is doing and their neighbor on the other side is doing, but the neighbor across the street maybe isn't doing. A lot of what we're suggesting that the village back off of are things that most people don't come to the village to anyway. And so the small percentage of ones that do end up paying the fee, doing the inspections, and so forth. And then the other thing I wanted to respond to was the question which I hear asked repeatedly about what other municipalities do. And, you know, it is oftentimes not a good or relevant question, because in almost every category that you would try and categorize Campton Hills across the state, we fall into a very small group. So we're one of 5 communities that do this, or one of 10 communities in that category, or one of 3 communities in another category. So for various historical and other reasons, we don't compare well to other municipalities, and I don't think we hardly ever do ourselves a good service by saying, well, what does some other town do in our situation when our situation is not applicable to almost any other town?
All right, any other comments? I think we'll move on from here. Thank you, Nick. Moving on to 9, additional items from president, trustees, or attorney. I just have a short report. We hosted a meeting here at the Village Hall on Monday, March 11th with our state representative, Dan Ugasti, 65th District. Several Kane County mayors attended, and our administrator, Rooney, also attended. Dan talked about several proposed bills at the state meetings. If anyone is interested in knowing more about these bills, please feel free to contact me or Representative Ugasti. And there's many, many bills he talked about, and some of them were really interesting. So, okay, and now
And,
move.
on that note, do you
Go
want to
ahead.
also talk about our neighbors, Metro West, and to one of the issues that we've talked about here of when do we put in a letter of opposition or support? And maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, we went next door to Metro West today and talked to Leslie. And she's been really good, though, about sending emails to me, and I think Administrator Rooney and Mike gets them, too, it sounds like. And if we want to reply with a letter or oppose or, encourage that bill, then I think it's up to us to do that. But
She does give us the draft kind
she
of format.
does, yeah.
So we are going to
yeah,
continue to what we talked about at an earlier meeting.
mm-hmm.
And they've got better visibility than we would individually, and, because that's what, large part of what their job is to track those bills.
Yeah.
And they do that.
Yeah, once again, I know I complimented them once before, but they're good neighbors, and they're really there to look out for us and keep us updated, so we really appreciate that. So, well, I'm sorry? Trustee Millette? Yeah, of course, go ahead.
To that end, the drive down for Springfield is set. I signed up for it. I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody else is interested. I think there was still some space available. It gets registered through Metro West. The couple times I've gone, actually several times I've gone, the meetings are with our local legislators on their turf, so they like to show off a little bit. They show us off as Kane County as a voice of 750,000 people, not just us. And to the end of, and it's a form of lobbying, but it's not registered lobbying because you're a voter. You can do it anytime you want. But Metro West does have a paid lobbyist that kind of sets up some of the meetings and guides our meetings. We also meet with public agencies to talk about issues that we may or may not be having with them, usually the Department of Transportation, EPA, sometimes natural resources. So it's a good experience. If you've never gone down, I would suggest it. It's a one-night over thing. There's good camaraderie with other elected officials, so you can ask whether their town's close enough to us to be applicable, or just ponder it, wow, we don't have to worry about that type of problem. We always wonder how much effect we're having. And I've always viewed it, and I've been doing this from my professional level too, and our friends in blue are really good at it, but the friends in red are the best. And I don't want to go on too much of a screed here, but just take a look at how effective firefighters are on getting things they want into state law. They are, I believe they are still the only employee that can work for the board that employs them. And that was changed maybe 15 years ago or something like that. You could work for the fire district that employs you.
And they could be the state rep.
And they can be a state rep, and they can do all the same things. So, but if we don't go down there, and this is one of those things that throughout life, you know, you either identify yourself or you let somebody else identify you. So if we're not there and there's a void, then anything can be attributed to us. So even if we don't know that we're going to go and shake the timbers of the Capitol and straighten out all the nonsense that's going on in Springfield, we still need to be there to let them know that we're watching them. And we also have the ability to get heads up on things, and it does sometimes parlay, and it has, where we get asked our opinion before things happen. So Leslie Mendley, who's the executive director for Metro West, used to work in the Capitol, so she knows a lot of people down there. And when certain things come, hey, so-and-so wants to run a bill on blank, what do you guys think about that? We've had the ability to get our suggestions in there and change bad bills or get bad bills turfed. So that may be the best reason to go. It's, you know, we've often heard the term, you know, sausage making for the political process, that this is part of the political process. We can't let the legislature operate in a vacuum, and we can't let, you know, every other group that goes down there, they tend to wear T-shirts of the same color. We don't. We dress like we're, you know, business casual or business. And they, we have buttons so we identify ourselves. But when you start, and if you've been at this for a couple of years or you plan to be at this a couple more years, it does have a bit of a catharsis on yourself when you actually sit with a legislator who you at some point think of, who is that person? You sit with them at dinner, or you sit with them at the reception and just hear about what the problems they have in their family and their kids. And I remember when Kay Hatcher was our rep, going to dinner with her and asking about where she was staying. Well, she was staying upstairs from the restaurant we were eating at because she was renting an apartment with 2 other people. And you find out that a state rep's budget at that point, and it's still true to this day, that part of the reason they fundraise is to actually pay for their constituent services, because their allotment from the legislature is so small that if you have more than one office because you've got a big district, it's hard to staff it. So these are the type of things, just by going down there, you understand that they're people too. And you can make a personal connection, and you can actually maybe get a phone number and pick up a phone and say, what the hell are you doing? And then you might get a reasonable answer to say, oh, okay, I didn't realize those were the other, you know, conflicting issues or the other side of the story. And you're like, okay, I won't bust your nuts about this anymore because I get where you're going. So consider going.
Yeah, well said, Mike. One more.
I just wanted to thank our clerk and everyone else who has cooperated in trying to make our videos work out well. Because we have these very nice microphones. They're super nice, but if you're not talking into it, you don't hear anything. So unless people are using their microphones, you're completely silent on the videos that the village is making. And so, you know, Trustee Johnson has worked very hard to learn how to, Clerk Johnson has worked very hard, to learn how to capture these videos. But everyone who's worked, who doesn't normally use the microphone, who is doing it, thank you, because if you don't, and that includes tonight, it was really challenging because we had the Finance Committee and everything, and not enough microphones quite to go around. So it really helps when people use them, because when you're watching the video at home and someone talks and they don't use it, you can't hear a thing. So thank you all for trying so hard.
All right, yeah. And Mike's here. We're sitting at this beautiful dais, and it was built by Mike, and we'll have official, something official when it's completed. So What's that? That piece? Okay. All right, motion to go into closed session for appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees or contractors, or litigation that is filed and pending, or is probable or imminent.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Millet, second by trustee Muncy. We will reconvene after, and roll call.
Trustee Boatner? I'm sorry, trustee Millet?
Aye.
Trustee Muncy?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Burson?
Aye.
Trustee McKelvey?
Aye.
And trustee Morgan is absent.
Okay, motion passes.